I'm probably going to show, it's already showing in my voice. A friend of mine here in Yerushalayim, sent me, and I guess a few others on his group, saying, this was my night, So he went to bed at 10 p.m. And at 1:40 p.m. he heard a boom. And then he heard sirens. Then he went down to the miklat. And then he was on the radio or on some news station, and he found out that there was 350 rockets on their way, and they could be here. It would take an hour or two to get there, so be nervous and anxious for another 2 hours, And then he did it all by the times of the day, like at 1:40 this happened, at 2:30. Then he hears that Netanyahu's on a private phone call with Biden, Things like this is like World War III for sure. And he goes on through the night that way. Finally he writes, about 4 a.m., he puts 3 Z's, he's sleeping, he's snoring. and then he writes, 7 o'clock, I woke up. Will there be a minyan in shul? Yes. Will there be a shir in Daf Yomi? Yes. So you'd think the whole world is exploding. And, life goes on, Baruch Hashem. I developed several classes on this particular subject. I'm titling the series, Celebrating Pesach with Ramban. Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman, not Rambam, Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, but Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman. We had the yeshiva that I went to was called Rabbi Jacob Joseph on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, RJJ, and we had a lay leader. I think his official title was chairman of the board. His name was, he's long gone, his name was Mr. Benjamin Konigsberg. He was an attorney and kind of a very, aristocratic person. And he spoke beautiful, beautiful English, although I imagine he was born, in the old country. But he was very, very careful about pronunciation of words. So he would refer to, Rambam is referred to in English as Maimonides. So what do you call Ramban? To distinguish between the two, the names are similar, but they lived a century apart. And they're very, very different people, both great. So he would refer to him as Nachmanitis. When we first heard him refer to Nachmanitis, I thought it was some type of a disease, Nachmanitis. I thought then, I wouldn't dare argue with him, of course, but I still think now, the correct pronunciation is Nachmanides, like Maimonides, Nachmanides. Ramban was a very, very interesting personality, and I chose him to speak about because we had planned to return to Eretz Yisrael. We were here for the outbreak of the war. We stayed for a little while, but we had to return to the United States. As soon as we could come back, we did this past Thursday. I thought Ramban also made a late in his life trip to Eretz Yisrael and remained here and built a shul here, Ramban shul in the old city. Although, as far as I know, and as far as anyone knows, we do not know where he was buried. He died in the year 1270, and toward the end of the 13th century, here in Eretz Yisrael, probably in Yerushalayim. But he writes about in various of his writings, he mentions his trip to Eretz Yisrael and what he found here. So he found in Yerushalayim, he couldn't find a minyan of 10 men in Yerushalayim then. But nevertheless, he settled in Yerushalayim. And however, he seems to have spent a lot of time in Akko, where then, the 13th century, there was a Jewish community where he could be. He, of course, was born in Spain and was a very prominent person in every way, including he was a great debater. And when the king and queen of Castile insisted that he represented Jews and he debate with a Christian, actually not a Christian, but a Jew who had converted to Christianity, and named Pablo Cristiani, and he had a famous debate, series of debates with him, and we have the notes, Ramban's notes on this debate, and he won the debate. So what happens if you're living under Spanish Christian rule and you win a debate? But you're in trouble.
Going to exile.
What?
Going to exile.
You go into exile, right? Well, you know, so he realized that he has no future in Spain, and he did what he always wanted to do. He wanted to make Aliyah. They didn't use that phrase then, but he wanted to move to Eretz Yisrael. The Ramban was the major Rishon who counts, in his count of the 613 mitzvos, he counts as one of the mitzvos aseh, one of the positive commandments, Yishuv Eretz Yisrael, to live in Eretz Yisrael. People dispute, Rambam does not count that as one of the mitzvos. Some say because it was a davar pashut, of course, you should live in Israel. Why should he count it among the 613? But Ramban explicitly lays out his stand very, very articulately, of course. And so obviously he was always had these tendencies, but this was like the push, you know, to avoid all the politics involved in debating Mishum Madim, people who converted to Christianity and Judaism. He wasn't going to spend the rest of his life. And he came to Eretz Yisrael. I shared briefly with my friends here, before we started, Rabbi Short and Rabbi Goldscheider, an interesting sefer. I try not to schlep my Sforim from the States here. Because I have plenty of Sforim in my apartment right here around the corner on Chad Ha'am. So this is a 600-page work by two professors at Bar Ilan, published about, some years ago now, 7-8 years ago. But their names are Professor Yosef Ofer and Professor Yehonason Jacobs. But they discovered, and many people have kind of figured this too, that the Ramban, after he finished writing his commentary on the Torah, which is really up there, number 2 after Rashi. If you speak of commentaries, traditional commentaries on Chumash, so Rashi, of course, is Rashi, but right after Rashi is Ramban. And so we have that work. However, you can sometimes sense in the writing that something's missing here, missing there. If you look at it carefully, obviously there either were some additions or some edits, or something at various places. So what happened? How did that happen? So they found evidence from examining manuscripts of the Ramban's commentary on the Torah in various museums throughout the world. Nowadays you can do this online. You don't have to go traveling to museums in Rome or in St. Petersburg or in Paris or wherever. You can go online and get permission to sometimes publish these manuscripts. So they found what they call Tosafot Ramban, Ramban's additions, extra material, and they therefore in this sefer of theirs they went through the. You have in this sefer, which I only have the flyleaf for here with me. I'll show you why I brought this along with me. First of all, it doesn't weigh much. You know. They go through the whole commentary and show you, hey, this is what's missing here. And it was taken out because it was struck by the Ramban after he reached Eretz Yisrael. When he was living sometimes in Yerushalayim, sometimes in Akko, he rewrote parts of he edited parts of his own commentary. And that's a treasure. You find out obviously he changed his mind about certain things. He wanted to phrase it differently, etc. So I'm going to pass around this flyleaf because you could see on it, in the Ramban's handwriting, the original And then at the bottom of the page, in smaller letters, again in the Ramban's handwriting, his edits. And this is to be found, if you want to go on a trip to Paris, in the National Library in Paris, in the section called H-E-B, Hebrew, 223. And that's where they got all this material from, so that appears, you can see the picture of it. Almost more dramatically, Ramban died in 1270, the year 1270 AD. And in the year 1972, so that's 702 years later, a group of archaeologists were digging in a mound called Kisan, it must be an Arabic name, Shebe'emek Akko. There's a valley, as you approach, you can see it from the highway, a sharp valley just outside of Akko. There were some archaeological ruins there. So they were digging around the ruins. They found various things from that century, from the 13th century, when Akko was a relatively large Jewish community. And what do you think they found there? They found a signet ring. You know, people in those days would wear a ring, and they would use that as a stamp to stamp their signature. And they would stamp the signature in wax, onto wax. And that signet ring with that stamp and the bottom, which shows you what was written on this, they look at this ring, and it's very clear. It's clear as day. It says, Moshe ben Nachman me Garondi. Garondi is the town in Spain near Barcelona called Girona, G-E-R-O-N-A. And that's the Ramban's signet ring. They found his personal ring, which you see a picture of it on the flyleaf here too. So he left his imprint on Eretz Yisrael. I'll pass this around. See, the manuscript is both in the front and the back, and the ring is a photograph of the ring right there. This brings us closer to the Ramban. So how did the Ramban spend Pesach? You know, we have as far as I know, we have no first-hand, he didn't write a journal, or if he wrote a journal, it hasn't come down to us. But he wrote plenty that give us background as to how he must have been thinking on Pesach in the 13th century. He was here in the 1260s, 1265, 1269, until he passed away in 1270. He was here about 8 or 10 years. Here, I mean, mamash here. He could have been walking the street right here outside, because he obviously lived walking distance from the shul that he established. The shul that he established is walking distance from you young people. For some of us, it's hard to walk uphill and down the steps, etc., to go there. But he's very close to us. The person who introduced me to the wisdom of Ramban was not any of my teachers, formal teachers in school, in yeshiva, but was my grandfather, my father's father, Chaim Yitzchak Weinreb, who was a very special Jew in many, many ways. But one of the things he was special about was he had several grandsons, and several grandsons old enough to sit down with him and study. And when I was in my early teens, he sat down with me and said he has to introduce me to the Ramban. It wasn't Parshas Bo, that whenever it was, I remember he made a point out of, we're going to learn something in Parshas Bo, even though now it's Parshas whatever it was at that time. Can't possibly remember, I was 14, 15 years old. But I do remember that this passage he considered to be the essence of the Ramban's teachings, and in his language, which was of course Yiddish, it says, Das is the Ramban. This is Ramban. Study this. So I had it asked, I showed a photocopy on both sides. It's one sheet, but there's two sides to it. And let's plunge right in. So on one side of the page, you see only one page. And on top it says Shemos Yud Gimel Bo, Parshas Bo. And then in the text itself, there's footnotes, all kinds of footnotes. I'll explain something about that in a moment. But the text is the Ramban's text. And interestingly enough, I consulted this new book about additions to the Ramban, and this particular paragraph, which we'll study together, I don't know how far we'll get, but this is he left this as it is. All right, this was not, he didn't edit it or correct it or rewrite it. This is what he wanted to tell us. Ramban has a way of writing very, very informally. Very informally. He writes as if he's talking to you, I mean to each of you, to me personally. He writes, if you look now 4 lines from the bottom, I think that if I made a little pencil mark before the word v'ata. That's 4 lines from the bottom. The line begins, Rabim shehem batim Rabim kasher kipalnu. Then there's a little period. Then v'ata, and now, Homar l'cha or lach klal b'ta'am mitzvot rabot. I'm going to give you the reason for many, many mitzvot. That's one way of translating it. The reason for many, many mitzvot. Or he could be saying, I want to give you the reason why we have so many mitzvot. Understand? Why do we have so many mitzvot? Especially around Pesach. Pesach, we have so many mitzvot, more than any other Yom Tov, more than Rosh Hashanah, even more than Sukkot. We have a lulav and a sukkah, but on Pesach we have a whole seder with various mitzvot involved, telling the story of Mitzrayim, Yitzias Mitzrayim, the mitzvah of matzah, the mitzvah of moror, and the time of the Beit HaMikdash, the Korban Pesach. What are all these mitzvahs about? So the selection that we're about to begin to study, he deals with 3 major concepts in Yahadut. Concepts that we all think about at one level or another. One is the concept of a mitzvah. What does a mitzvah mean? I mean, all of us here know the word mitzvah, but mitzvah is very unique to the Jewish religion. If you compare us to our 2, quote, daughter religions, Lahavdil, Christianity and Islam, their religions don't have mitzvot. You don't have commandments. Even though they speak of 10 commandments, the idea of doing a mitzvah, the idea that honoring your parents is a mitzvah, the idea of eating matzah on Pesach is a mitzvah, the idea that taking trumos or maestros from grapes, to use Rabbi Goldschar's example, is a mitzvah. That's specific to Judaism. So why so many mitzvos? And especially why so many mitzvos are connected not only to Pesach, but to Yitzias Mitzrayim. There are many mitzvos which have nothing to do with Pesach. And one famous one is to be honest in business, right? Not to have weights, weights, weights that are faulty. You're a businessman, your weights have to be proper. These are psukim of the Torah, and the Torah, after giving you this mitzvah, says, Zecher li'yitzias Mitzrayim. We have a mitzvah to v'ahavtem es hager, to show special love, special attention to a person who is a serious, authentic ger, convert to Judaism. We have to treat him specially. Why? Because you too were once a ger. You were a gerim in Mitzrayim. We have so many mitzvahs of that sort. For example, when we make Kiddush on Shabbat, not Pesach Shabbat, but Shabbat like yesterday, or this coming Shabbat HaGadol, we also say in Kiddush, Zeichel Yitzias Mitzrayim. Shabbos was given to us in Parshas Bereshis, right? That all goes back way before Yitzias Mitzrayim, the beginning of creation. And yet, on that Kiddush and Shabbos, we say, this also is Zeichel Yitzias Mitzrayim. Why is so much connected to Zeichel Yitzias Mitzrayim? So this is his question. And one topic. We'll try to go through this topic as quickly as we can, cover most of it. Then the next topic is tefillah, another concept, mitzvah, tefillah, prayer, big topic. And the next topic is Nisan, miracles. And you'll see how he weaves it all together in his inimitable way. So let's look together. He says, he's speaking in the first person and talking to us as if we were individuals, not a group. He doesn't say, Omar lochem, but rather locha or loch. I'm speaking to you, Mr. or Mrs. so-and-so. This rule about mitzvos. Hine. Then he gives like a historical overview of the development of religion in humanity. So he says, Me'ez heyos, Ayin Gimel means Ovdei Galilim, those who are idol worshippers. From the time that human beings began to worship idols, Mimei Enosh, the time of Enosh, way back in the Parshas Bereshis, Heichalu hadeyot lehishtabesh be'emunah. From that point on in history, the idea of faith began to become very, very perverse. The deos, the opinions about God, divinity, religion, spirituality, there was a shibush, there was a decay, a deterioration of faith. Because he's speculating that from Adam and Chava on, people believed in God, they were talking to God, right? Noah spoke to God. Adam and Chava had direct contact with God. It was not a matter of faith, of believing. Of course, the God, he's part of who we are. He brought us here. But then they reached the generation of Enosh, when things went sour. And they went sour in various ways. Mehem kofrim be'ikar. And this is certainly true nowadays as well as, 5,000 years ago. Kofrim be'ikar. Kofrim be'ikar means total atheism. I don't believe in any of this stuff. V'omrim, and they say, ki ha'olam kadmon. The world always existed. The world goes back to infinity in time. There was no creation. It just always existed. Kadmon means primeval, way back. There's no beginning. This idea was first, I don't know about first, but early was the philosophy of Aristotle. And it's the philosophy, I'm sorry to say it, of many, many people, Jewish and non-Jewish. Today, I don't believe the world was a world, Big Bang, and there was a world. Ki chashu b'Hashem, they absolutely deny the existence of God. V'yomru lohu, and they say it ain't so. It's not true. There's no such thing as God. It's a fairy tale. That's one approach. And I'm sure you're all familiar with people, maybe people you're close to, who really believe this. Umehem, but there are other groups who makchishim b'yediyaso hapratit, who say, no, there is a God, but he doesn't know individually what's going on. He doesn't know that there's a room full of Jews, not a room full of Jews, but quite a few Jews, who had a sleepless night, and it wasn't exactly a peaceful night, because, we expected the rockets to come falling down right on our heads. And God doesn't know about that stuff. God created the world, and then he went off and did his own thing. He didn't care about people's individual issues, big issues like living through a war, or even small issues. This person has chickenpox. Well, God don't care about that. V'yamru eicha yada el. Again, this is a paraphrase of a pasuk. And he says, such a person says, how does God know? Yesh deyo be'elyon. God is elyon. God is way up there in the clouds. He doesn't know what's going on in this world. He doesn't care. Umehem sheyodu b'yediyah. And there are those that say, no, God is omniscient. He knows everything. He knows what's going on. But he doesn't care. Umakchishim b'hashkacha. They deny what we call providence, that God cares. God cares about you and me. Who are we? Worms compared. Why should he care? So there's three groups here. There's a group of total atheists. There's a group who believe in nothing. There are those who believe, there's a God up there, but he doesn't really have anything to do with this world. There are those who say, no, he does understand and know what's going on. He knows everything, but he doesn't care. He certainly doesn't care whether we are good or we're evil. Why should he care? You want to be Hitler? Be Hitler. You want to be Moshe? Be Moshe. Lahavdil. He don't care. And they deny the whole concept of hashgacha. Hashgacha is what we call in English divine providence. God cares about us. He rewards us for doing mitzvos. He wants us to do mitzvos. And he will reward us or he will punish us, as the case may be. V'yasu Adam. Okay, now we go to flip the page, the passage on the right side. Here you have actual page number, Shin Mem Vav, 346. Kedigei Hayam. We're all like fish, all right? Everybody here knows, in the ocean, lots of fish. There's tuna fish, there's herring, there's sardines, there's sharks. What? Gefilte fish. But we don't care about each fish. Do you care about this fish or that fish? So no. So we're like fish to God. He knows we exist. He knows we're here. But God doesn't care about that. He's not interested. Just that humans, we're not interested in this individual fish and that individual fish. It's God kind of left the world to go on its own automatic pilot, and people can do what they want to do. They can be good, they can be evil, they can be horribly evil, they can be righteously good, but he doesn't care. Now, so that was the condition of humanity from the time of Enosh, and of course today you have all of the above. You have total atheists, you have agnostics, you have people who believe this way, that way. I believe in a God, whatever it is. I always remember the fellow in my former shul in Baltimore. His name was Henry Retches. He's since passed away. But Henry and his family were hidden during the Holocaust by some Gentiles that they knew who were farmers. I heard the story from Henry's mother, who was the matriarch of the family. So she and her husband and several children and some friends, this was in Poland somewhere, and during the Holocaust, and they were wandering, hiding in the woods and this and that. And then finally the father says, I've had it. And he said in Yiddish, Ich will gehen mit alle Jiden. I want to go with all the rest of the Jews. They're all going somewhere. They're being shipped to Auschwitz, Treblinka, being shot in the woods. I can't live this way anymore. Like constant hiding and hunger and everything. I'm going to just surrender and go back to the shtetl. Whatever they do to the rest of the Jews, they can do to me. His wife, who I heard this story from herself, said, no. We have to keep trying to find some way that we can survive this. How about the farmer, whatever his name was, we used to trade with them, etc. Maybe that their family will hide us. So the father said, what? They live right by the highway, and the Nazis, patrols and everything, are driving up and down the highway all the time. Sometimes they stop at this farm for a drink or to buy some eggs or fruit or whatever, and if they find Jews there, and this farmer he won't put us up, they won't hide us, because, anytime they can be found out. If they get found out that they're hiding Jews, they're dead. So she said, no, let's try. So they went, a group of 8, 9 individuals, some little children, including this Henry, whom I knew well. I remember my shul, since passed away, but he was like an infant then. So he has no memory of it, but he's heard the story many times. And so they went to this farmhouse. So the farmer said, I can't put you up. I have my own family to worry about. If the Nazis find out, and they come by almost every day, they come into the house and they search and they'll find you. I'm a dead man. My whole family is dead. So they begged, and he said, you know what? I'm going to ask the mother, the woman, the senior woman in the family, in the Gentile family. She's very religious, very devout, and I'm going to ask her what we should do. So, all right, he went to his grandma figure, and she said, I'm going to ask Mary, Mother Mary. That's our belief system. So she went into some secluded room and spent the night there talking to Mary, praying, counting her rosary beads, whatever she was doing. And then she came out and says, Mary said we should hide them. We should hide them.
Oh, after
this. Yeah. Mary answered her and said, hide the Jews, protect them. So they made a little space in the barn, a hole in the ground, and everything else like that. And they were there for 2.5 years. So much so that, and then they survived, everyone in that group survived. But Henry, who was an infant when he came, he never learned to talk because they couldn't talk. They would signal to each other and made no sounds for 2.5 years. Try a 2.5-year-old kid, and he can't speak. If he speaks, you shush him up, you stuff something in his mouth because, if they hear you, we're all dead. So his vocal cords, the muscles that are required for speech, were atrophied. So when he was freed, when they were all freed at the end of the Holocaust, he couldn't talk. He physically couldn't talk because the muscles necessary for speech were just not developed. And then the whole story, he went through some special type of speech therapy and everything else. And I used to kid him, now you learned how to talk. You even talk in shul. That was a long, long after the Holocaust when I had that conversation. So obviously, there are people who are people of great faith. It's not our faith, but have great faith, and that shows that this person, individual, believed in God, believed that God knows what's going on, and believed that God cares, because that was how we're communicating. I can give 100 such stories, 1,000 such stories from Jewish figures, but I want to say this is something that human beings are capable of. All right, but that's the problem. Very few people are capable of that type of deep faith. So now he continues, Ramban. He says, suppose, however, you find a situation where God shows special attention to a community or to an individual person, and he changes nature, adjusts nature in order to help or save or rescue this person. And suppose that happens, and you're there to observe this. You see that God shows some special attention to a group, maybe an entire nation, entire people, or even to an individual, and it's just miraculous that this happens. Suppose God, one fine day, cares so much that he wants to favor in some way a community, a group of people, or biyachid, or some individual, and he wants to do some wonder, some mofes, some wondrous thing, supernatural thing, changing the minhago shel olam. Now, we woke up this morning, still half asleep, and we thought, who knows what happened overnight? Okay, there's only one siren that we heard here in Yerushalayim, but who knows what happened in the rest of Eretz Yisrael, the rest of the country, and everything. We feel we'll see one horror story after the other. We woke up this morning, and it was, perhaps this was a shinoi minhago shel olam, that a well-developed, militarily well-developed country like Iran can shoot, 500 missiles at us, and 99% of them were shot down. Not just shot down by Israeli Air Force, etc., but by American battleships or whatever, destroyers they had in the ocean, and by France, I understand this morning, also chipped in a little bit. Jordan, right? Jordan sent planes to shoot down rockets. This is not minhago shel olam. Yeah.
Rabbi, I didn't want to interrupt, but I thought, until we don't get to the end, the three different type of people that you were speaking about, the atheist, the agnostic, the people that don't believe, what you're referring to, I believe, is called Nisan derech hateva. I'm just going to take another minute, and of course I didn't want to interrupt. Hanukkah comes to mind, but I found that the time was to ask those people who do not believe that Hashem moves everything, but everything in this world. How did they wake up this morning? What did they think? What did they think happened last night?
They think that the Israeli army is terrific, that without fault, that Biden is a hero, France are tzaddikim, Even Jordan has done tshuva.
So we don't believe in
Look, people believe all sorts of things. I'm just presenting it as if I wasn't a religious person, but just looking at the facts. And we don't always have these facts. Sometimes, how many soldiers have we lost already in Gaza? 260 or something like that? More?
How many we would have lost?
Yes.
That's the question.
Yeah.
How many you would have lost? That's why.
Yeah, okay. All right. But you don't always feel, we just happen to feel this way, at least I feel this way, this moment. I woke up and I was getting ready to get trauma counseling for myself, just what happened. And we do have grandchildren, soldiers in the army right now. My wife, wakes up every morning wondering how they're doing, So this line, which he wrote, 700 plus years ago, if God wants to take a group of people, it could be all the Jews living in Eretz Yisrael or all the Jews in the world, or whatever. O biyachid, one individual. V'yasei mahem mofes, v'shinui min hago shel olam v'tivo. Yitbarei lakol. So once a person has this type of an experience, and sees this type of a, he doesn't use the word miracle yet, but this type of a miracle, so it's clear to him, bitul hadeyo to'ela kulam. So, right?
604 since October 7th.
604, including October 7th. Okay. All right. I don't mean to minimize the number, but we didn't say miracles. We saw tragedies. But when we see something that's so different, so unusual, this is mevatel, this nullifies, this cancels out all the deot, all these opinions of total atheism, of partial atheism, of God doesn't give a darn about the world, etc. They all, they're all refuted. Ki hamofes haniflo, this wondrous event that happened, moreh sheyesh la'olam Eloha. This shows us, teaches us that there is a God. Mechadsho, this is a God who is mechadesh the world, who created the world. The world is not kadmon. It didn't exist for billions of years before because there was some unknown dark hole or Big Bang or whatever. No, he was mechadesh the world. He renewed the world. He created the world from nothing. V'yodeya, and he knows all. Umashkiach, and he cares about it all. V'yachol, and he's capable of doing what he wants. Right? These four words. This is the basic. Our basic beliefs as Jews. He is mechadesh es ha'olam. We say that in the davening every day. V'yodeya, God knows everything. He knows what we're thinking. He knows that we're here trying to get closer to Him. Umashkiach, He cares about each and every one of us. And v'yachol, He's omnipotent. Suppose this is prophesied. Suppose we would have had Yeshaya Hanavi, who would have come, a few days ago and said, "Hey, Iran's going to throw all this stuff at you, but don't worry about it. Everything's going to be okay, and hopefully will remain okay." We don't know what the end of the story is yet, but I suppose a Navi did that. So then we have an additional proof of something which is basic to our religion, and that is Yizbar Mimenu Od Amitas Hanavua. Now we know there's a person named Yeshaya Hanavi or whoever. We don't have such people walking around today, unfortunately, but there is such a thing as a prophecy. Ki Yadaber Elokim es Adam, that God speaks to humans. V'Yagale Sodo, and He reveals His schemes. Sod in Ramban's language does not always mean secret, like we use it in modern Hebrew. It means counsel, discussions, plans, schemes. God has the ear of Nevi'im. You have all these ingredients. You believe in a God who is mechadesh, v'yodeya, mashkiach, v'yachol, v'mikale sodo, elavadav hanevi'im. Then you have the whole Torah. All right, and now we come to Pesach. Yetzias Mitzrayim, v'lochein Yomar HaKosov. That's what the pasuk says. B'mosim, when it comes to these wonders that God did miraculously in Egypt for us, and L'man Teidaki Ani Hashem B'Kerev Haaretz, When we spill a drop of wine, depending on your custom, spill a drop of wine for each one of the makos, dam, svadeya, each of those is for a reason. The reason is, Ani Hashem bekerev ha'oretz. I am God, but I'm not a God up in the heavens in some throne totally alienated from the world. I am bekerev ha'oretz. I'm right down there with you. Lahorot al ha'hashgacha. This is to teach you that God really is down with us. Kilo azav osal mikrim kedatam. That He didn't abandon us to chance as these non-believers believe. V'yamar, that's only one pasuk. Another pasuk, L'man te'da ki Lashem ha'oretz. That means God's powerful. The world is His. Shemayim Lashem, v'ha'oretz nasan l'vnei adam, but God controls it. L'horot al hachidush. God created it. Ki heim shelo. Shebara'o meyayin. He created them ex nihilo, out of nothing. Another pasuk says, "Bavur teida ki ein kamoni b'chol haaretz." I've got no competition. I can do what I want. The horos al hayechola shehu shalit bakol. He's all powerful. Ein ma'akei biyado. Nothing can stop what God wills. Ki b'chol zeh hayu hamisri makrishim mistapka. Because the Egyptians didn't believe in all of this stuff. Everything that we just listed, they either didn't believe in it, makrishim, atheists, or mistapkim, agnostics. They say, I don't know, maybe there's a God, maybe there's not. There's famous for...
I don't know the name of this guy. Pharaoh said, I don't know the name of
I don't know, yeah. I don't know this guy, right? So, in Kain ha'osos v'hamosim ha'gedolim edim ne'emonim. So the wonders, the miracles that we will, yes Hashem, next week, a little more than a week, sit by the Seder and recount all these miracles. It's all a testimony. We are all witnesses to Emunas Habore uBetorah Kula. Now he says something which is really interesting, because people ask, kids especially ask, Rabbi, okay, I see all these Nisan. We're learning the Haggadah Shel Pesach. I see God did this here. And then after all 10 makos, he split the sea, and we went across the sea. But all that was 3,000 years ago. What have you done for me lately? All right, that's what modern man asks. Where is he now? Where is he now? So here's what he says about this. Uba'avur. God is not about to do wonders in every generation. God is not there to prove Himself to any Rasha, any evil person, or any kofar, any atheist. If you think about it, throughout history, after a certain point, I'm not sure when that was, people just stopped believing in God the way religious people believe in God. You see every day, the Christian church, Catholic church especially, they're losing membership. All these various polls in the United States, all the various Protestant sects, they can't fill the church. They can't even have a, quote, a minyan on a Sunday morning. They can't do it. That's one thing that you see. Okay, kofrim. They deny it. Why bother? I can watch football. I can get up early. I can do an exercise. I can sleep late Sundays, whatever. They're kofrim. They don't believe anymore. Europe has churches in Europe can't survive. They can only survive as museums. The United States is still more, in God we trust type of thing. But it's not very, very well-grounded anymore. And Resha, called Rasha, evil, wow, you need evidence that evil exists. So, God kind of figures, like Kavayochel, so to speak, I'm not going to go and show these miracles to people who don't believe, who are evil. That's not what God is supposed to do, says God. I can do it to a people or to a time in history when people saw wonders, they said, this is God. You see, when I left Florida, so had a fellow drive me. We rented a car, and then we returned the car, but the guy had to drive me back to Century Village. So it was a black man, an African-American, and he said, and it was their season. It was Lent recently, a Christian time. It culminates with Easter, yeah. So what was he doing Easter morning? He says, the first thing I do, because I want to get closer to God, I wake up very early, and I go to the boardwalk, and I watch the sunrise. The sun rises, I see it, I say, that's his God, So there was a time when humanity was that way. Humanity was that way. They may not have believed in the God exactly the way we do, but when they saw nature, when they saw where the good things, the sun rises and the eclipse occurs, etc., they felt in some way this was God talking to them. Now,
that's why the eclipse was so big, because they felt it was God.
Yeah, well, we Jews also have all kinds of theories about what an eclipse might be, or an earthquake, or whatever. But the point is that in the human experience, general humanity, there were centuries and centuries when wondrous things, the wonders of nature, triggered a reaction, a religious reaction, a spiritual reaction. It's not true anymore. Right? Now, if this climate change, so it's because we have to reduce the automobile exhausts. It's because of this or that or the other thing. That's what science has done. It diminishes the wonder of the universe, because there's an explanation for everything, and there is an explanation for anything. You have to take the leap to believe in a God that's behind the science. That's already... this is his take. You raised the question, what about the people who weren't impressed by experiences that we had that feel miraculous? So they have explanations, they have rational reasons that this is why this happened, this is why the other thing happened. Just not to be bound to religion. All right. I gave you a taste now of his take on mitzvot, because the mitzvot that we do are our way of keeping God in the picture, so to speak. If we do mitzvot, we are saying, I'm doing this mitzvah. You're sitting in a sukkah, you're eating matzah. All right, what is this all about? Well, this is all about a God who redeemed us, etc., etc., etc. This is all about that. So doing a mitzvah is the way that we keep God alive in a time in human history when we're not going to see open miracles. We're not going to see that. We're not going to see the splitting of the sea, etc. But every person, every Jewish person who performs a mitzvah is making that statement. That's one part of what he said. I see that we're just about running out of time. So I want to drop down a little bit on the same page, the same passage on page Shin Mem Vav, where he shifts gears a little bit to prayer. To prayer. So if you look at the line that begins all right. The line begins with the word "L'kofer lahachish emunas Elokim," and then it says a fascinating thing: "Ki hakone mezuzah." The person who buys a mezuzah goes into the store and buys a mezuzah for his door or her door. Mezuzah echad, for a small amount of money. Nowadays the price has gone up, but it's still not so much money. V'kava b'pischo, and he takes the mezuzah home, bangs it into the doorway. When this kavein being yona, and he has an intent, he's thinking as he's banging in the mezuzah, kvar hodeh b'chidush ha'olam. Just by doing that, why are you putting up mezuzah for? So some people will say because it's a good luck charm, but it's not a good luck charm. It's because there's a God, and He created the world, and He knows what we're doing, and He said we should put a mezuzah on our door and reflect on it, etc. B'chidush ha'olam u'b'yedias ha'borei v'hashgachaso v'gam b'nevuah. Who told you to put up a mezuzah? Moshe Rabbeinu. V'ha'amin b'chol pinos ha'torah. He doesn't have to go, as they do in some religions, and say, "Hey, I believe." No, Hang up a mezuzah in your doorway, and you're making that statement. You're making a statement. Putting up a mezuzah also testifies to the fact that we believe he took us out of Egypt. That's why they say, I'm skipping a few phrases. That's why we're supposed to, Pirkei Avos, even a trivial, quote, trivial mitzvah is equal to a big mitzvah. Shakulon chamudot. This is the Ramban's words. In another version of the manuscript of the Ramban, he says chamuros with a resh. All mitzvahs are strict. No, the footnote corrects that. Shakulon chamudos. They're all chemda, all precious, dear, wonderful. Chavivos miod. It's a beautiful thing. Every time you walk by the mezuzah, you're making a statement about your belief in God. And all the mitzvahs have one reason. Do this mitzvah because you're making a statement that you believe in God. And we confess to God, we admit to God, we thank God that He created us. That's the whole purpose of creation. What reason then, does God have to create human beings? Because He wants creatures to acknowledge the fact that He created us. All God wants from us down here below, is that we should know and teach that God created us. And now he goes on to tefillah. I see I'm running out of time, so I want to share with you. I was sat in on Rabbi Goldscharder's conclusions, and he was telling stories, this story and that story. So I mentioned here a mezuzah, which seems to be a small, easy mitzvah, which anyone can do. I used to give when I was a rabbi in Baltimore for many years. So I had a women's class I used to give every Thursday morning, where Baltimore is laid out. Everybody who has children in any of the local yeshivot, Beis Yaakov, whatever, have to do carpool. Right? There's no buses from, etc. Now, maybe it's changed now, but this goes back some years. So we would study together every Thursday morning. It was called the post-carpool pre-Shabbos class. And so we wanted to study, the group wanted to study, besides the parsha and usual things, they wanted to study a subject of halacha, right? Open up a Shulchan Aruch and look at the Mechaber and the Ramah and the Shach and the Taz, really, like what the women would say, like the men do. That's how we wanted to learn. Okay. So I had some suggestions of what we could learn, and then it occurred to me that the laws of mezuzah, which is a very important mitzvah, very commonly known, very commonly practiced, is a mitzvah equally on women as on men, right? The laws of what women are not obligated to do, like the mitzvahs aseh shehazman grama, women are potter from mitzvahs even like shofar and sukkah and lulav, because they're all time-bound. But mezuzah is not time-bound. Mezuzah is place-bound. So if you have your own home or your own room in an apartment or whatever, and you're a woman, you're equally obligated to put up a mezuzah and make the bracha, etc., etc. So we studied for a whole year, because there's plenty of material what makes a kosher mezuzah, all right? How you prepare the parchment for the mezuzah, which parshiot are included in the mezuzah, how high does the mezuzah have to be, etc. So this brings me to a closing story. I had the privilege, or we, the Baltimore community, had the privilege that Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky was a famous Rosh Yeshiva of TORAH V'das, really a very special type of person. He, in his last years, in his dying, what proved to be his dying months, he spent with his daughter, who lived in Israel, in Baltimore. Her husband, Rabbi Diskin, was the founder of the Beis Yaakov of Baltimore, and she, Mrs. Diskin, was the daughter of Yaakov Kamenetsky. Yaakov Kamenetsky had several sons, some of them of their own right famous, Rav Shmuel Kamenetsky and others. He had 3, 4, 5 sons, so Rav Yaakov was aging, and he loved company. Every once in a while, Mrs. Diskin would call up somebody. I was one of the chosen few. And she said, do you have a free morning maybe? For some free time? Because the daddy, needs somebody to talk to. He just has to have someone for conversation. He was a very friendly, open kind of person. He had a sense of humor. So I took advantage of that opportunity. So once she calls me up and says, you got to take Daddy. You got to take him out, take him for a walk. You got to do something. He's just beside himself. Remember, he was very old. Although I'm not much younger than he was at that time, but he was, but he was very old, and so I came to see him. So he says, I asked him, the Rebbitzin, Mrs. Diskin says, maybe I should take you for a walk. So he said, no, I'd rather go for a drive. You have your car here? I said, yeah, go. So I said, fine. I asked him, where would you like to go, So he says, I want to go to the Gan. So I thought he meant to the park. Gan usually means a garden or a park. So I said, we can go, Druid Hill Park, we can go and see. It's a big lake and there's swans in the lake. So I said, no, Gan Yeladim. I want to go to a kindergarten, not to a garden, to a kindergarten. Can you take me to a kindergarten? So I took him to the school in Baltimore known as TA, Chafetz Chaim. I took him to the kindergarten because I knew the teacher very well. She was a friend of my wife's. Her name is TORAH Zif. Maybe she's still teaching kindergarten, I don't know. But she was the kindergarten teacher for a group of boys. So we came. I called her up with no iPhones then and everything. But somehow I reached her. I said, can we come? Oh, it'd be a great honor. So we came. And I walk in with him, I escorted him inside, and he goes to the door, and he was about to kiss the mezuzah. He looks up, there's no mezuzah. He looks down here, there's mezuzah. Right?
Little children.
So he says, what's it does? So I said, well, ask the teacher. So he asked her, what is this? Mezuzah, halachically, is supposed to be in the bottom of the top third of the height of the doorway. This was the bottom third of the door. So he explained that to her and asked her, why do you have them sit down so low for the little boys? So she said to him, because the boys can't reach the mezuzah. They can't reach it up there. So they can't kiss the mezuzah. So we explained to her so gently, I can just picture it in my eyes. He turns to her and says, in his Lithuanian and Yiddish, it's not a mitzvah, it's a cushion de mezuzah. There's no mitzvah to kiss the mezuzah. It's a very nice thing to do, but it's not a mitzvah to kiss it. There's a mitzvah to have it on your doorway. If you never kiss it, that's okay too. So he tells her that there's no mitzvah to kiss it. She says, I know that. And she also went to seminary, whatever. I know that, but, for these little kids, what am I going to teach them? I got to teach them it's very important to kiss. So you kiss it, that's what we all do. So he said, well, I'll tell you what, you have to, the rule is, when you train a child, this is like a lesson in education, you have to do the mitzvah for that child in the proper way. Like a lot of people I used to do it, I don't know if they do anymore. When they came for the Arbamina, for the Lulav and Esrog on Pesach, on Sukkot, I'm see how sleep deprived I am. When it comes Sukkot, so you buy, a little miniature. So they used to buy a lemon, not an esrog, but a lemon, and some leaves. You give it to the kid. No, pretend. So he said, you can't do that. You can't do that. Because then the kid's going to grow up and he's going to remember you buy a lemon, or maybe a grapefruit and some clover leaves or something, and shake it up. You gotta give him the all right. It doesn't have to be a muhud or $100 esrog. It can be a minimal esrog, but you got to give him the real McCoy. The same thing here. So she said, okay, I'll raise the mezuzah to where it should be. But how are the kids going to kiss the mezuzah? So then he turns to her and he says, Ich will euch weisen. I'm going to show you. And he went like this. You blow the kiss. You blow the kiss upward. I even see it this side. Like that. You blow it up. And he says to the kids, okay now? Let's make believe the mezuzah is over here. How are you going to kiss it? He had 25 little boys, little spitting God boys playing around with themselves. And he made them all go like this. So this story, which I was a witness to this story, has been told and retold in various ways and with various modifications, but that's how I remember it. A little mezuzah can be, can bring a shmirah, can protect us, and obviously we need God's help with a protection, and we have what seems to be so far, maybe it's a simon of what's coming up in the future, but it's important to acknowledge the Ron Shalom and the way we spread the theory, the belief rather, in the existence of God and who God is and what God is. So we do it through doing mitzvahs. We're not going to do it through a philosophy class, these kinds of things. Those don't work anymore, if they ever did. But when we do mitzvahs, each and every one of us individually, and certainly all of us as a group, as a community, as a OUisrael, doing mitzvahs is the way we bring down God we make Him tangible, because we feel He's with us, and He'll always be with us. And we live now in a land of Eretz Asher Eni Hashem Elokecha Bo. God is watching over this land. Yetz Hashem, we should have a Chag kasher v'sameach.